Let's talk about ProGrade new CFexpress Type A card lineup, review their CFexpress Type A 4.0 Iridium card, which they sent me to do a review, and also talk about their new card reader, the USB 4.0 one, which they have just released to work specifically with these cards to get the maximum speed possible. There's a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it. This is ArtIsRight. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. Full disclosure, ProGrade sent me this memory card along with a card reader for me to do a review. All the opinions you're about to hear are going to be my own. If you create with a camera, the common thread that links all of us, whether you do still or video, is that we need some type of storage. And it would come in the form of a memory card like this or sometimes SSDs. And the more manufacturers we have out there, the better off we are as consumer because they are now going to compete on value and price point. Now, one might think that a memory card, there's really not much to review about. And in a sense, that's correct, if we think about the way how this has been coming from the past. But if we look at where the industry is right now, a lot of these companies are now really building out an ecosystem around these memory cards that requires that you use their card, it requires that you use their card reader to gain certain advantages of software on the back end. And I think this is really a neat way of approaching it. So you can use this memory card along with any other card reader out there that's compatible, but you're not going to be able to access the software. And I think that's kind of like one really cool thing about this. And it really makes us think a little bit whether we're going to go with brand A or brand B for a memory card. And we would tend to keep with those brands. But let's talk about the CFexpress Type A 4.0 card first, and then we'll jump in to talk about the ecosystem a little bit later on. So I'm going to refer to this CFexpress Type A 4.0 as Type A 4.0 for the remainder of this video, just to keep things simple, because CFexpress can be a mouthful at times to say that. So there are a couple advantages with this new 4.0 generation that I really like. The first thing is that we are now seeing across the board a price point that drops below $1 per gigabyte. That is just really awesome value-wise, because now what we can do is get a much more robust memory card. We can also have a much faster read and write speed for both in camera and when you download your content or whatever you create down to your computer. And that's really awesome compared to the SD card that were before. And predominantly, let's just be honest, the camera company that uses these Type A cards are Sony cameras. Most of them out there right now anyway. I'm not sure if there's another brand camera or not. If you do know, leave it down in the comments. I do want to hear about that. But anyway, so price point being number one. Secondly, what we are now getting with these 4.0 generation is read and write speed that in many instances is higher or even double the previous generation. So this also means that yes, the camera may not be able to utilize those speed yet, but we are now able to download these cards to our computer, the content that we've created much faster, provided that you get the latest generation card reader, which links me to the next thing we're going to talk about. Now, the one thing I want to really show you is quickly the packaging this comes in. It comes in this paper packaging like so, and it comes in a outer packaging just like that, and you just slide out like a matchbox. I think it's really nice. They pretty much curtail or gone away with the plastic casing altogether. Personally, the plastic casing is something that I pretty much see once and I don't really use it ever again. So I kind of like that for the environmental factor. So I want to mention that a little bit. So this is their USB 4.0 card reader that you will utilize with the latest generation card to get the highest download speed or the highest write speed to your card if you're writing to your Type A card for some reason. Here is the previous generation card reader. So the one thing you're going to notice right away is there are color variations. For instance, the new one is gray, the previous generation is black. The previous generation comes with a dual card reader, so you have a CFexpress Type A, and you also have an SD card. This one just comes in a single slot. And another thing to note about this is the card goes into this newer 4.0 generation. It just slots in and out just like that. There's no spring-loaded mechanism, unlike this one where there is a spring-loaded mechanism. And the other thing to note is the weight for this generation card reader is a little bit heavier. My guess is that the chipset and everything is really taking a lot of weight. So that's pretty much the front of the device. The back is just a notation for a USB 4.0, where the previous generation said that this is a USB Type-C. So just something to note between the two. The size and everything else is pretty much exactly the same. They're also still magnetic, and you can stack them on top of each other just like that. A couple of other things is that this also comes with a really great cable that's also branded ProGrade. I really like that. And on the back of it, it tells you that this cable is capable of doing 40 gigabits per second at 240 watts. So they are giving you a really great cable out of the box for this card reader. In addition to that, you also get a lot of paperwork, but one of the other things that's really neat about this is they give you this little metal card thing. And the reason why they give you this is so that you can take the sticker out from the back of this, peel it, and pretty much put it on your laptop screen. So you can attach the magnetic card reader to the bottom like that, and you can just have the card reader just stay on your screen while you're downloading it. So I think this is a good idea for anyone working on the road. Personally, I don't like to put any weight on my screen or even just a case on it, because I've noticed that on a Mac, after a long, usage, the screen hinge can get loose at times, and I have repaired those before. So it's kind of a pain to get there. So personally, I wouldn't put a weight on there, but if you want to do that, you can, and that's the reason why they include this metal piece in the box. So just something as an FYI there, something new that I've learned. Okay, so a couple of things that I really want to quickly talk about is comparing the current generation card, or the newer generation card, this Iridium one, to the previous generation, that is the 160 gigabyte card that I have. So one of the things that I already mentioned is the fact that the speed of this card has pretty much doubled the previous generation one. That's the first thing. Although there's one, I would say, minor downside to this, is that all the newer generation card has a VPG, that's the video performance guarantee, of 200. That means it can sustain a write of 200 megabytes per second, whereas the previous generation card, it has a VPG of 400. I think this is a trend where the manufacturers are now realizing, seeing where these cameras are going anyway, that we don't really need the 400. For these cameras, 200 is going to be just fine. Although I did get a question from one of my viewers asking, if I buy a VPG 200 card, is this going to be future compatible? Because even though no cameras right now can really utilize, or can really photograph or film rather 8K 60 yet, what happens, a future model can really go out and do that, or 8K 120 or something like that. One thing that I will say about that, I genuinely still believe that the VPG 200 would still be compatible with those cameras, or at least with 8K 60 anyway. The main reason why is because Sony cameras is not really going to be shooting RAW format anytime soon. We're always going to be shooting some type of compressed MOV, MP4 format, that I think we're going to be okay with the VPG 200 card. So that's my personal perspectives on that. I don't have any information in the crystal ball or anything like that. Personally, I've also tested this card recording 8K 24 on my A7R5. It works just fine, so that's just something to note about these. And it works with the other resolutions too in the Sony cameras that there are right now. So with that said, what I'd like to do is share with you a few things, and we're going to plug this into the computer, run some performance tests, and I'll also show you the refresh software that they have. So we'll start out at ProGrade website, because I want to show you the two Type A cards that they have this time around. So rather than doing the Type A card like they have in the previous generation, now what we have is a CFexpress 2.0 and a 4.0 Type A card. So the 2.0 is referred to as gold. The 4.0 they sent me to do a review, which is this one, is referred to as their Iridium card. There's a couple of other variations between the two, that if you want a capacity that's smaller than 480 gigabytes, you would choose the gold, or the 480 is like the common one between the two. And then the Iridium one can also go up to 960 gigabytes. So you do have a few more options there. A few other things to note about this is, like I said before, all of them are priced at or below $1 per gigabyte. So the 120 right now, it's on sale. It is about like $1 per gigabyte. And if you keep going up in price, you see the price start to drop. Personally, for me, I would probably say if you have to pay this full price, I probably would choose the Iridium one, because there's a couple of differences between the two. Yes, they are refresh compatible. They have a VPG 200, but the nice thing about the Iridium one is that it can read at 1800 megabytes per second, or 1800 megabytes per second. What that really means is you can download these cards really fast to your computer, whereas the gold one can only do 900. The sustained write for the gold is 600, and the sustained write for the Iridium card is 800 megabytes per second. So I just want to kind of point that out. But even with this card, the 4.0, we're still looking at the price point of below $1 per gigabyte, and that's, I think, is just really awesome. Do note though that the 400 80 gigabyte card is kind of about where the price break is to get the best value, because if we take a look at the gold 120 right now, we can see that the on sale price is about $1 per gigabyte, but if it wasn't on sale, it's a little bit more than $1 per gigabyte. So personally, I still think, like, you know, that price point is a huge miss if it's not on sale, but just something to think about. And this is why I say the Iridium one I think is a much better deal. Now, with that said, this is the card reader that they sent me to do a review. It's a CFexpress Type A single card slot USB 4.0. And like I said, it's a little bit heavier than the previous generation, but this is going to guarantee that you're going to get the full read and write speed from the fast card that we have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug this into my computer and we'll do a few things. So I'm going to put the card in. First, what I like to do is run a speed test just so that we can see how fast this card is. And what I'm going to do is run the speed test at the 1 gigabyte file to simulate smaller files being written to the card. So we're going to choose that. Click on start. And for this one, we're getting a write of 1300 and we're getting a read of around 1500 megabytes per second. Right, it's now faster. So these are just based on the trial run. You're seeing the result, the data from it right now. I mean, personally for me, I think this is just really great results. Now, this is not fully like sustained all the time, but I think this is going to be fine. The other thing too to note about the read and write speed of these cards is that using the Blackmagic software, it's set at 8K DCI 60. It's actually fine for Blackmagic RAW, for ProRes 422HQ, H.265, and most of the time we're going to be shooting some compressed format on the Sony camera anyway, that I think that these VPG 200, this card should perform just fine without any problems. All right, the other thing what I'd like to show you is this ProGrade Refresh software, or Refresh Pro. A couple things to note about Refresh Pro is that it is a free software that you can use it for life now, although the documentation with the card reader was rather interesting because it was just like, you know, it's on a free trial basis. I think this was printed before they made the decision to change their card reader software or their refresh software to make it a lifetime license. Although it is a lifetime license, there are a few caveats to note. First, you have to go and add it to the cart, even though it's free and $0 and everything. Put in your email so they can send you a license, you can activate it. That license number they're going to send you can only be activated on one computer. So I've tried to install it on my desktop. I'm trying to using the license on my laptop again. It doesn't work. So you do need to go to the card again, add that, and get another license number. So every single computer you want to put this on, I believe you're going to need a new license number for that. Now, why don't they make this just a software you can download and install without license number? I'm not sure. I think that would have been a better solution, but nonetheless, this is now compatible with Refresh Pro, which was a big miss in the previous generation card, because the previous generation card, you cannot use the Refresh Pro. Now, Refresh Pro, I think, is a really cool software because this is now talking about getting into the ecosystem, right? In order for you to use all these software that comes with it, or the included one anyway, you now have to use their card reader. But the advantage of that is you can now really go and see and audit your card performance. So the Refresh Pro, I think, is a little bit interesting in terms of the GUI, the user interface. I can't just go and select an action. I have to select a card first before the action is enabled. So I can do a health check, I can do a sanitize, or I can do a health and sanitize. So the health is just simply going to do a health test, and I would just click on start there, and it's going to check the lifespan of the card. Pretty much it's going to tell me how, you know, the health of the NAND chip that's on the inside of a card, which I think is really great. It's always good to just really see. Personally though, let's just also be really honest. Unless you're a studio that constantly go through these cards all the time, reading and writing all the time, chances of your card going, you know, being defective or going to be a dud or really maximizing the read and write of the NAND life, it's going to be rather low. Not that it's not possible, it is, but most of the time it's going to be rather low. So for this, it doesn't give you a report. You have to hover over it. You can see that lifespan remaining is there. This is the firmware version. I did not see anywhere in there or even just on the menu where I can go in and choose to update the firmware. I believe this might be one of those where you plug in a card, it talks to the internet, there's a new firmware, it's download, and it asks you if you want to update automatically. I have some data on this card, so I'm not going to sanitize this yet, but if you choose the sanitize option, this is pretty much restoring your card that you have to the factory default. So it's going to be as close to the factory as possible. So one of the things that I find the sanitize feature useful is rather than formatting through a camera is to do a full sanitize, because it's kind of like formatting, but they also understand how the NAND chip and the firmware on the inside is really performing, so they're going to do a slightly better job in that regard. But yeah, that's pretty much it about their software. I wouldn't say is the most intuitive software that I have used, although it's actually one that does work and function in the capacity for what you want it to do. And personally, I find that, having to go and get the license every time for a software that they're going to give us for life is a little bit cumbersome. Although it seems to be something that they're doing, and I'm okay with that. But like I said, these are the memory cards now, the newer generation ones, where it's not just you buying a card, you mixing the brand. You want to buy all into the same brand, because now you have these advantages that you can gain from buying in the brand, from using their card readers and everything. It's now becoming more of an ecosystem. And the other thing too I want to point out is that ProGrade at this point in time too have also gone in and start to make external SSD too. So as you can see that these NAND manufacturers are not just really making memory cards, they're now going into other business related to memory cards as well. So it's just something very interesting to note there. But based on my testing of these ProGrade card, the new card reader and everything, one thing that I really like about their card reader that I haven't mentioned it already, is the fact that it's much lighter than other brand, even though it is a heavier card reader because of the components have to go on the inside. But what I really like about this particular card reader is the fact that it's USB 4.0. There's no switch, there's no toggle. You have to change a different mode in order for it to be compatible with their Refresh Pro software. And I think that's a huge plus. That anytime you can design something that's much simpler for us creative to use, the less we have to think about and the better experience we have, that's actually a win overall. But like I said, this card is a pretty good card to use in the cameras, especially for any of the Sony users out there. And based on my testing, I already use this on so many different shoots. It is a good card. It hasn't failed. It hasn't done anything that it's not supposed to just yet. And best of all, I think we are getting a lot of advantage where we're now getting the speed. We're also now getting the price point. This is really awesome on these cards. And I have tested multiple different brands. I mean, overall, until maybe 5 years from now, I can update you on the long-term usability of these cards. So far, they have all been good. So that's just my thought about that. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Give this a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you're new. I'm Art, and I thank you for your time.